Oh, okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Now I hear your holy voice.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Okay, we started on Friday. We started a new Mishnah on Tes Vav Amud Aleph on 15a. Okay, we're moving along in the Masechta. Hamekare Sukkoto bashpudim. If someone makes he goes ahead and he makes a sukkah, but he makes the sukkah in a way where he used materials that were kosher for schach and not kosher for schach. He went ahead and he placed shipudim is like a spit, a long pieces of metal. Now we know metal is not kosher for schach. Metal is invalid for schach, and he went ahead and he placed metal. Parts of the sukkah, parts of the schach were made out of metal. So now the question is, what's the status of the sukkah? Because parts of the sukkah had metal roofing, and parts of the sukkah had kosher roofing. And the way he made the sukkah, the way he made his roof is, so the Mishnah states that if he makes it in a way that there is equal space between the metal and the non-metal, which means he went ahead, let's say he placed poles of metal this way. And then after he placed poles of metal this way, he placed kosher bamboo. So if there's more not kosher metal than bamboo, it's not kosher. But if he left the amount of space in between each section of not kosher schach, he placed an equal section of kosher schach. That's the language of the Mishnah. If there is the space between them is equal to the space of the not kosher schach of the metal, it will be kosher. The Mishnah gives two types of items that he used for his roof. Either he used the metal spits, or he went ahead, the side boards of his bed, which are invalid for schach, he went ahead and he used those side boards of his bed to use for schach purposes. We're going to see more. The Gemara is going to go into more detail about these sides bed that he used. The side, you have let's say a bed has 4 sides to the bed, 2 side, frames. Part of the frame, you have this wall piece of wood, this wall piece of wood, which is the longer sides of the bed. Then you have the smaller sides of the bed, which is the other side, the width of the bed. So he used one of these sides of the bed, which we'll get into a little more later on. So the Mishnah says, if he leaves an equal amount of space between these beds and he places schach there, kashera, it's kosher, which at first glance we said seems to indicate as long as you have 50% of the sukkah is kosher schach, and 50%, and you don't have 50, it's not 51 to 49 not kosher, it's 50-50. Seems that it's a tie. It seems that if it's a tie, it's still kosher. You're still good because you have your cover is at least 50% from kosher schach. The Mishnah states that this sukkah is technically still kosher. The Mishnah continues. If you went ahead and you dug in a gadish. A gadish, let's say, is a pile of hay. Now, hay, or a pile of hay, a pile of straw, these are items that are technically kosher for schach. They grew from the ground. They are detached. They don't mekabel tumah. They're not items that receive contamination. So if you take a haystack, now you have a haystack. So a haystack is, it's not a sukkah. It's a haystack. There's no 4 walls and a ceiling. But you went ahead and you dug into that haystack We have a picture over here of a haystack. And you see that you dug into the haystack, and as a result of your digging, you now created a roof, and you have 3 walls, right? A sukkah, 3 walls for a sukkah is enough. You went ahead and now you created a sukkah. For that, the Mishnah states, that's achote begodish lasas sukkah. You dug into that pile of hay with the intention to make a sukkah. We say ain't a sukkah. That's not a sukkah. Why is that not a sukkah? Because you have a special law that we learned earlier. When you have to make the schach. When you make the schach, you're making the schach for the purpose of the sukkah. That it should be a kosher. There should be a purpose of a sukkah that it should protect you from the sun, create shade. When the schach was made in this pile of hay, it was a pile of hay. It wasn't made, the ceiling, the schach, which is the ceiling, was not made for intention of protecting from shade, from sun. Now, what you did was, you went ahead and you just dug underneath the roof of this haystack. The actual roof, the actual item that becomes schach, nothing was touched. You didn't do anything in it, and therefore, right, that's not a kosher sukkah. Okay, that the Mishnah has no question about. Okay, now the Gemara continues. Lema tahave tiyufta the Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua. Let us say that this Mishnah is a refutation, will be a very strong question and a knockout. Let's suggest that it's a knockout on the opinion of Rav Yeshua, of Rav Huna, the son of Yeshua. What was the discussion? That we're using this Mishnah as a question. The itma parutz ka'omei. If a person went ahead and had a wall, a mechitza, a wall, that part of the wall was the parts of the wall were equal to the parts of the wall that were the opening, the breach was equal to the whole to the standing part of the wall. Let's say you placed certain size, you created this wall, and you used certain amount of size boards. So let's say Rashi gives an example. You went ahead and let's say you put boards, a three tefach wide board, let's say 10 tefachim high, 3 wide, and then next to it you left a space of 3 tefach, and then you put another 3 tefach board, then you left a space of 3 tefach. So you had a board, 3 tefach wide board, 10 tefachim high, space of 3 tefach, empty space, and then you went ahead and put another board of 3 tefach wide board. So you did this, let's say, and you did this, and then let's say you had 8 boards, you had 4 boards and 4 spaces, or however you. Now the question is this wall a kosher wall or not? There's an equal amount of space in the wall as is the actual. You have the actual wall, which is standing. If you measure the amount of the wall that's standing and then measure the amount of the wall that's not standing, they're equal amount. So now the question is this wall considered a wall or not? That's the question. Meaning, if you have more breaches in a wall, if a wall is more open than closed, that's not called a wall. That's called an open area. That's not called an enclosed. You're not closing anything with something which is more open than closed. But in this situation, when they're the same size of opening and close, would you consider that a wall? Okay? Meaning, if you have such a hole in a wall, if someone bangs the wall, let's say you have a wall and someone really bangs the inside of the wall. You have the frame of the wall. Let's say you have the frame of the wall still standing, but you have a whole cut in the wall, right? You would say there's no wall, right? If let's say here's the wall stands here, goes from here to here, and then the guy cuts the inside out of the wall. Would you say that's it? What? It's not a wall, it's not a wall. Meaning, what you say, I didn't hear what you said, Doug. But I'm saying, halacha, but halachically, we're not gonna say it's the halacha. Why not? I mean, at least, if, morning, Simon, because if you have too much opening in the wall, it's no longer a wall. Yeah, you have the whole, it's totally open. That's what the Gemara is stating over here. If you have a wall and the majority of the wall is open, it's not called a wall. But what happens if you have a wall, Simon, and 50% of the wall is standing and 50% of the wall is cut, is broken through? Do you say you still have a wall or not? So that is the machlokes, and that machlokes is, let's say, regarding private property. You know, for a place to be a private property, let's say on Shabbat, let's say if you have 4 walls and you have a certain space inside those 4 walls, so that makes that space a private property, right? Because it's enclosed. If you're, let's say in the Reshut HaRabim, in the street, if you want to carry in the street on Shabbat, so on Shabbat, where there's no Eruv, you can't carry in the street on Shabbat. But if, let's say, you're within an enclosed area, private area, Reshut HaYachid, that the private area, you're allowed to, just like your house is a private area. But what makes something private? So it has to be enclosed. It has to have walls around it. It has to have a certain amount, and let's say it has to have 4 tfachim area inside. So let's say it meets the criteria, it's a size is proper. But let's say the issue is with the walls. Some of the walls are breached, there's holes in the wall. So the question in the Gemara, they had the question over there regarding Shabbat, what about if it's 50-50? It's exactly 50% the wall is standing and 50% of the wall is cut. So there's a machlokah. There's a machlokah over there in the laws of Shabbat. What's the status? So that's the discussion of it. The Itma. Parutz Ka'omed. We are on the art scroll. We are on 15A4 in the art scroll. So Parutz Ka'omed. If the open area is the same size as the closed area, so what does it say? Rav Papa Amam Mutter. Rav Papa says you're allowed to go ahead and carry within this area, in this enclosed structure, even though it's only 50% enclosed, but 50% enclosed is enough. That's what he holds. 50-50. It's a tie, like in Congress. You get the vice president to make to make the vote. 50% works. Rav Huna brings Rav Yeshua Ama also. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, says it's forbidden to carry in that place unless it's a little bit more than 50% closed. It's not enough, and there's a little gimel on that, which would seem to indicate that's the halacha. It's not enough for a wall to be 50% closed. It has to be at least 50.1, at least more than, morning, Ralph, at least more than 50% closed in order to be considered a wall. So the Gemara is comparing the halacha by Shabbat to the halacha over here. The Gemara is comparing that you went ahead and we have a sukkah. We have, regarding kosher schach, we have 50% kosher schach on the sukkah, and we have 50% not kosher schach. Now, we mentioned that there's no one area of the sukkah that the not kosher schach is at least 4 tfachim. Because we have a halacha that if the not kosher schach is 4 tfachim wide, it would just split the whole sukkah, right? We spoke about that earlier, right? So we're talking about, let's say you have the metal poles, you have, let's say, 3 tfachim of metal poles, then you have 3 tfachim of kosher schach, 3 tfachim metal poles, 3 tfachim of kosher schach. So you have no one space that is more than four tefachim or more wide of not kosher schach, right? Remember that point that we said. If you have a middle of a sukkah, you have not kosher schach the size of 4 tefachim, that will split those sukkah. If this is a sukkah, wall 1, wall 2, wall 3, if I only have 3 walls and I have going across the whole sukkah not kosher schach of 3 tefachim, that will split a 4 tefachim. That will split the sukkah. So we're talking about it's less than 4 tefachim morning going on together. So now the Gemara is comparing the laws of Shabbat, the laws of Sukkah. And the same way that by Sukkah, the Mishnah seems to indicate, good morning, Mr. Silverman.
Morning, Ravi.
On Tesvav Amen Aleph, in the article it's Tesvav 15a4. The same way that by Sukkah, if it's 50%, it seems from the Mishnah that if it's 50%, only 50% kosher schach, it doesn't do it, it's not enough. 50% it would be enough, the Mishnah seems to indicate. But the Mishnah says if you have similar, if the space between the kosher and not kosher schach is the same, it's kosher. So the Gemara is saying by Shabbat, by a wall for Shabbat, 50% should also be enough. Even if the 50% is breached, but 50% should be enough. And that is not in sync with the opinion of Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua. Because Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua says that if you have a wall regarding Shabbat that's only 50% standing, he says that's not considered a kosher wall. The wall has to be at least 50.1 standing. So the Gemara answers. Is that clear, everybody? Everyone got the question? Everyone got it clear? Okay. So the Gemara answers that that your understanding of our Mishnah is not the way you thought until now. Amar lacha Rav Huna. Rav Huna is going to, he would explain, he could tell you that the Mishnah is not a refutation of his opinion. What does the Mishnah mean when the Mishnah states if there's space between the metal poles that are equal to the metal poles themselves? That means the space in between the metal poles. You have the metal poles, and adjacent to it you have empty space. Then you have metal poles. The space is equal to the metal poles, and on that middle and that space that's empty, you placed kosher schach, and therefore you had total not kosher. Equal of not kosher was kosher. Equal not kosher equal kosher. That doesn't mean that the space was exactly the same exact size as the metal. It means it means benichnas yotzei. It means that the space, you left the space, that space would be an similar amount of space that would be easy for you if you would want to go ahead and place poles in this empty space. That's, you have poles and then they have a space. If the space is equal to the poles, that you'll be able to go ahead and place the poles in this empty space easily, to place poles in and to take the poles out. Now, obviously, to place the poles in and to place the poles out in a space that's similar, you would have to have a little larger space if you want to put something in easily and take something out easily, if you're using the same amount for the same amount of space. What does that mean? Let's say you have 3 tefachim wide of poles. If I tell you, Ellie, we're on 15a 3 or 4. If I tell you, if you have poles that run across your sukkah, these poles are not kosher. If you could place a space between these poles that will be equally, be able to go ahead and take these poles and easily place these poles in this space that's in between and place it in and place it out, then it's kosher. Now, if I have 3 tvachim of poles, how much space do I need to put if I want to easily place, not tight, not that I have that's going to be hard, that's going to be difficult for me to squeeze it in. If I want to get 3 tvachim of poles into a space, how much space would I need for the space to easily get it into what? A little bit more than 3. Because if I want to just stick it exactly without any height, it's hard for me to get it in, then maybe I could get, if I have an exact 3 tvachim space, I could take 3 tvachim of poles and put 3 tvachim poles in an exact space of 3 tvachim. But that's not going to be easy for me to get 3 tvachim of poles into 3 tvachim of space of poles, because I'm working with it. I'm no extra space to put in. So therefore, the Gemara says, our Mishnah, when it says, if I left a space equal to the poles, that's easily for me to place those poles in, and I fill that space with kosher schach, then it's kosher. So that means the space adjacent to the poles is at least 3 point something. It's a little bit more than 3 tvachim. So therefore, at the end of the day, the Mishnah is not saying it's 50%, 50%, 50 not kosher, 50 kosher. Rather, there's at least 50.1 or 50.2 or maybe 51 at the end of the day. When you count up how much space was filled with kosher schach, we're talking about was the majority. Since it's the majority, that's why the Mishnah states that it's still considered a kosher sukkah. But by Shabbat, if you only have exactly 50%, if it's parutz ka'omei, if the holes in the wall are exactly the size of the standing wall, that would not be kosher, because you need at least 50-something percent, at least more than 50%. That's what Amar Lacha Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, he'll answer, my kamotan, what does it mean kamotan? V'nichnas v'yotzei. It means going in and going out. If it's easy to go in, you left a space for the size of those poles, kamotam, if the space adjacent to the poles was the amount of space that you could get those 3 tvachim of poles in easily, that, and then you place instead with kosher schach, that would be a kosher sukkah. The schach would be kosher. And the fact that you have a certain amount of not kosher, so it comes out you get a 49% of the sukkah of not kosher schach. No one place has more than 4 tvachim or more wide of not kosher schach. It's spread out the not kosher schach. Let's say 3 tvachim here, 3 tvachim here, 3 tvachim here. And the Mishnah states that the sukkah would be a kosher sukkah. So the Gemara says, now we're turning the page. Mabruk, Tesvav on the base, 15b. So if you look at the Rashi, what is the Gemara's question? The word Efshel and Samsei means you could be exact. So the Gemara's question is, how do you know to translate the Mishnah, that the Mishnah is only referring to this specific case, that the space was more than the exact space of the not kosher poles? Look at the top Rashi. But Eshel is Samsei. You have the Rashi? Eli, you got the Rashi? Tesvav on the base, on the top of the page. Simon, the left side. Eshel is Samsei. Kasalka Daitach. The Gemara is holding, Dr. Nefid, you got it? The Gemara is holding the high the commentary. Mr. Silverman, you got it? Tesvav on the base. Everybody says on the base. Kasalka the high the commentary. That which the Gemara answered, b'nichnas v'yotzei, that there's enough space to easily go in and go out with the poles. That's the general normal situation. The normal situation is if someone wants to leave a space, a space for his poles, but people generally don't leave exactly. If you want to get these poles in to a space, the amount of, how much space would you leave between these? If you would usually leave a little larger space for you to get the poles in, that it would get easy to get in. Generally, people don't go ahead and figure out that amount of space exactly the same size that I placed before. Lo pachot v'lo yoter. Not less and not more. So since it's usually if you're leaving a space for the pole, enough space for the poles, usually you're not such a architect that you're leaving the space in a way that's exactly the same size. Sometimes you're either leaving a little less, or sometimes you're leaving a little more. So therefore, the Gemara wanted to say that the meaning of the Mishnah, that you left the space for the poles, usually you leave, it's normal for a person to leave more space. Not to be, people are not so exact with the measuring stick. So the Gemara says, Rashi says, the Gemara asks, if a person would want to be exact and say, I want to put exactly the same amount of space of those metal spits that are not kosher schach, I want to leave an exact space. I want to do the same. A person has the ability to be exact. Uktani maslis. So therefore, the Mishnah, when it says if there's a space between the not kosher schach equal, and you created a space that you could, an equal size space, it's possible that it's exactly equal, that you made an exactly equal space between the not kosher schach and the kosher schach. Uktani masisin, and the Mishnah said that it sounds like the Mishnah could be talking even in that type of case that you were exact, and yet the Mishnah says, kamotam kashera, that if you left the similar space, which would be even exactly the same amount, so we see that the Mishnah is talking about even a case that it's exactly the same amount and it's kosher. So therefore the Gemara, therefore it would sound like 50% will be kosher. And therefore that will be a question on the rabbi who holds by Shabbat that a wall, if it's 50 standing, 50 cut in the middle, 50 missing, it's not a good wall. Here from our Mishnah, it seems like it's a good wall. If it's a good schach, 50-50, the Gemara's understanding it should be a good wall, 50-50. So the Gemara shoots back, Omar Rav Ami b'madif. Rav Ami says, we're talking about b'madif. We're talking about, it's not that you wanted to suggest that the Mishnah could be understood even when it's exactly the same amount of space. So he comes and he says, no, that's not what the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah is talking about the average, normal way people leave space. When people leave space to get something, if I want to get something of similar size, of this amount in an equal space, if I want to place this into something, usually I'll leave a little bit more space to get it in. And therefore, the Mishnah is not talking about when it's exactly 50% kosher, 50% not kosher. The Mishnah is talking about the normal case, the average case. You left a little bit more room to get these poles in easily. Look at the Rashi. Yeah. Right. So right. So the Gemara, very good. Dr. Navid is asking. There are two different laws, right? There's two different laws. One is a law called Succah, and one is a law called the walls of Shabbat. One is called Schach, and one is called walls of Shabbat. What makes something a private domain of Shadiyachid? The Gemara, even though they're two different concepts, they're totally two different laws. A wall for Shabbat and a Schach for a Sukkah. But the Gemara's understanding, the Gemara understands that they are comparative. That the idea of, more of a question of how do you look at something that's 50%? Do you look at something that's 50% is chatzi considered like it's a majority? When you have 50%, the number 50, when something is exactly 50% this way and 50% that way, how do you look at it? The Gemara's understanding is the way you understand it by schach should be the way you understand it by Shabbat. If you understand that 50% it's called you have kosher schach. If you say that 50% kosher schach meets meaning everybody agrees that a majority would win, right? There's no question if you have a majority of kosher schach, it's a kosher sukkah. There's no question if you have a majority of a wall that's intact and a minority of the wall is broken, it's a good wall. If majority is intact. The only question here is, and also similarly, if it's a minority is schach, and only minority is kosher schach, or minority of the wall is standing, that's not kosher. The question is what is 50% looked at? So the Gemara's understanding, there is this concept called mamatzinu. Mamatzinu is that whatever, it's one of the ways, the 13 midot of Yishmael, Hatonah Dreshet, that if the Torah, or we have a halacha by a certain case, unless there's reason to explain why that should not apply somewhere else, we would apply that law that applies by that subject to a different subject. So if we find that Hashem says that 50% of when a Torah says, I want you to have schach, I want you to make yourself a sukkah, and a sukkah is called al shem haschach, because of the schach, your schach. And if we find that if you have 50% schach, kosher schach, that's called a sukkah. So then when you have a halacha that you have to have walls, and so we should say 50% is called, it's considered a wall. The same way 50% is called schach, so 50% is considered a wall. That's what unless you have a reason something compelling to say that something is different, then they will be the same. Like I like to say, the bracha on an apple is Borei Pri Eitz, and a bracha on grapes is Borei Pri Eitz. They're different. One's an apple, one's a grape. But there's nothing compelling, but they both have similar, they're the same subject of brachot. But the fact is, you have different cases, but the laws should be the same unless there's reason to compelling different. So that's the Gemara. So Rav Ami says, look at Rav Rashi, Mishani. Rashi is about 5 lines from the top. Umishani, Amar Rav Ami, b'madif. You have the Rashi? Amar Rav Ami madif. Matnisin, the Mishnah lo avshir b'misamsei. The Mishnah does not permit the sukkah to be kosher if it's exactly 50% kosher schach. Ela b'madif. There's extra revach shebenatayim. You left a more space between the poles, al rochav hashpudim, on the width of the poles, ukamotam diktani. And when the Mishnah says, but they were like them, that means there was a space next to that you're able to go ahead and get these size poles inside that space easily. Okay. Rava suggests another answer. Rava has a very interesting answer. Rava says, "Afilu tema she'ein ma'adif." You can even say that you did not make it more, that the Mishnah is not talking about that you left more space. You left more space between the not kosher schach and the kosher schach. You left exactly the same space between the not kosher schach and the kosher schach. But the kosher schach was extended above the not kosher schach. And therefore, because the kosher schach overlap over the not kosher schach. So therefore, that will go ahead, and now you have the majority of more kosher schach than not kosher schach, because that kosher schach will knock out that not kosher schach. Let's see what the Gemara answer is. Amar Rava Amar, we're on the second, we are on 15b, 15b1. He says, Rava Amar, Filu Tevash E Madif, Im Nisunim Sheti. If the spits were placed Sheti, lengthwise, Nosen Erev. Then you went ahead and you placed the schach widthwise. So what does that mean? So let's say I go ahead and I have these not kosher. So take a look over here. I have these poles. Now, if I have these poles, I have poles over here. Let's say 3 tvachim poles, and then I have empty space of 3 tvachim, and then I have again poles of 3 tvachim, and then I have an empty space of 3 tvachim. In between the equal amount of empty space, I put kosher schach, right? So I have kosher schach exactly the same size as the not kosher schach, right? Poles 3 tvachim, then I have kosher schach 3 tvachim. But if I would go ahead and place it this way, right, parallel to each other, so then that would indicate that I have 50%. I have the same exact kosher schach as not kosher schach, right? And that was the Gemara's issue. If I place it this way, 50% poles, 50%. If I have exact 3 tvachim poles, 3 tvachim schach, 3 tvachim poles, so that was the Gemara's issue. So you only have, it's 50-50, and you're telling me 50% is good enough. You don't need to have 50 point something. But the Gemara's answer is, I did not place it this way. I did not place the metal poles this way and the schach this way. The bamboo this way. You know where I placed it? I placed the metal poles this way, and then the equal amount of space, I placed the schach, the kosher schach. Now, the kosher schach, how is this kosher schach not going to fall down? The poles, the metal poles are, let's say, going from wall to wall. Okay? So they're going over the walls. They're able to hold on to something. But if I put bamboo this way.
That's the overlap.
So the only way it's not going to fall down if some of these kosher schach have to go on top of the what? Top of the not kosher schach. So on this side, I got to have some of it going on top. And on the other side, I have to have some going on top. So even if the space in between is exactly the same, but the fact that some of the schach, of the kosher schach, is on top of the not kosher schach, so most probably it would seem that, and then at the end of the day, if you'll equal up the whole total of the sukkah, so you now have more. It's true, the kosher and not kosher over here are on the same line, right? Because where it's overlapping, it's on top of not kosher schach. But now I have not kosher schach mixed with kosher schach, and the total number, and I have more kosher schach because of that overlap than not kosher schach. So when I have, you hear that, Mr. B'tesh Ralph? So at the end, now I have the fact that I have more kosher than not kosher. That's why it's going to be kosher. And therefore, it's no proof that you can have 50% will not be enough, the Gemara says. It has to be at least 50 point something. And therefore, by Shabbat also, a wall has to be at least more of the wall, not 50-50 standing, 50 reached. It has to be at least more than 50%. We'll continue tomorrow. I want to wish everyone a very great day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you all for being here. All the best.
Hi, Mike.
Enjoy everybody. Enjoy everything. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.